Welcome back to the show, Pick the Scab podcast. Today we have a truly special guest joining us, Paul Pereyra, an acclaimed divorce recovery expert, certified life coach, and the author of best-selling book, Reclaiming You. With over 15 years of experience helping men over 40 bounce back from emotional chaos of divorce, Raul is known for his no-nonsense advice, deep empathy, and uncanny ability to help men rediscover their purpose and confidence, whether it's navigating loneliness, rebuilding trust, or figuring out how to date again, which is crazy, without using your ex's Netflix password. Raul has seen it all and helped men thrive through it. Today, he'll share his insights, proven strategies, and maybe a few laughs to help us turn this challenging chapter into an opportunity for growth. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into the practical wisdom and inspiration waiting for you on the other side of the heartbreak. Welcome, Raul. This is going to be a fun one, man.
Nice. Good. Hey, David, I'm happy to be here. And you painted me up to be this beautiful, awesome person. I hope I live up to it, man.
The Mona Lisa of men's divorce.
Shoot, man. But I love it. I love the energy. I'm happy to be part of the show. And hopefully our conversation does create some laugh, but also maybe some inspiration and insight to our people, for sure.
So tell the people out there a little about yourself, and I got some questions for you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So my name is Raul T. Pereyra, and I was born and raised in the beautiful city of Los Angeles, East LA, California, and 20 years or so in human resources, training, learning, development. And then now what I do and my true calling and passion is helping people like you who are struggling with confidence and trying to figure out what your next chapter is, and just supporting you and giving that gentle push. Sometimes it's a kick in the butt, but it's really supporting our people with the confidence that, yes, divorce sucks, but there's also life after divorce. And whether that's a new business that you want to start, that you want to be an entrepreneur, or you just want to show up more as a holistic, more present person in your leadership capacity, then I'm here to support you. I really love helping people. Everybody that meets me, they're like, oh yeah, Raul, that guy, yeah, he really gives. So I'm here to give.
All right. How do you help men over 40 redefine their identity after divorce? We talked about identity a little bit in the pre-interview.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the biggest issue is this. Our identity is tied to our outcomes and what we say we're committed to, but really our commitments are tied to the results, right? So let's say, for example, if I say verbally in public, I am committed to losing weight, right? That's my identity, right? In the moment. So I'm committed to losing weight. I say that publicly, but then privately, or then I'm at a party, for example, and I see sugary donuts and snacks. Hey, shoot, they're calling me. I'm going to go there. Give me some coffee. Give me some donuts. So now I am no longer committed to losing weight. I'm committed in the moment to eating that sugary snack and satisfying my lack of will or satisfying my appetite for sugary snacks, right? So we have to be very careful as men what we say publicly, right? Because there's two things that happen in our minds. One is we can say publicly because we want people to view us as an identity that we want to portray. Look at Raul. He's so fit and he's committed to losing weight, right? But then inside, we're also struggling with an identity of how, what is it that we truly want in our nature? So there's this tension. And what I like to teach is that you can say everybody is committed. We can say we're committed 100% to everything, any cause or any particular behavior or identity. But really what matters most is how you show up and your results and the outcomes that you do. The behaviors that you're most aligned with is really who you are in your identity. So once we start unpacking that it gets real really fast, because I can say that I'm the best coach in the world, leadership coach in the world. But if I'm committed to a consulting job or doing training and development or doing something else, then I'm not, right? I'm scattered. I'm not focused. And so my identity, I'm not being true to who I say I'm going to be true to.
So how do men become more focused? What's some of the ways they can become more focused in order to hone in on that new identity? Because you go from married to single. So how do you focus to get to that single identity?
That's a that's a really good question. And really, if I may share a little bit about some of the insight I had in terms of my own health crisis. So I had a health crisis during the pandemic around 2020. Appendicitis gone sideways, right? And I realized I was in bed. I was in bed recovering at the hospital or even at home. It was a 3-month recovery process, in and out of surgery at least 3 times. And I had this light bulb moment. I was in bed and I was always thinking, like, why is this stuff keep happening to me? Why is my divorce happen to me? Why did me growing up with an alcoholic dad? Why? And it was always this thing about to me. And I felt like a victim. And at that point, David, I was like, hey, what? I'm done being a victim. The mental shift happened when I said this phrase. I said, you know what? This didn't happen to me. It happened for me. And that phrase alone was really what took me in the trajectory of where I'm at now in developing a new framework. I got my own coaching through Dr. Benjamin Hardy, through one of his challenges that we had, a group coaching. And I learned his framework and I went all in on positive psychology because I wanted to heal. I understood that my life, the stories and the chapters in my life, in my past, were still driving my present, was still driving the identity of who I was in the present, how I was showing up. And once I made that shift, that it happened for me, I began to explore very deeply and internally that, yes, the events happened, but they happened for me. And they happened for me to give meaning to those situations, narratives, old stories, to see what is the lesson I can extract. For example, my divorce happened for me to figure out that I was not going to settle again. Me growing up with an alcoholic father, it happened for me because now I gave up drinking. I actually confronted this idea of my being an alcoholic, and I was always skating around it. But then I was like, wait a second, shit. I married my first wife was an alcoholic. I was an alcoholic. We were partying being alcoholic. But now I'm able to look at that with grace and understanding and say, wait a second, this really did happen for me. What is the lesson? What is the gain that I'm getting from these experiences? And that's really the first part of the journey that I take I take people in, how we begin to discover what are the stories in your past, the traumatic events. In some cases, it is divorce. In other cases, it's something more traumatic. But we begin to unpack that, and it gets very uncomfortable very fast because some people don't want to go there. And they're like, Raul, you're expecting me to go into this traumatic event and relive it? And I go, no, I'm not. I'm just giving you the psychology behind it. And this is how it worked for me. And I'm just inviting a conversation. So it's baby steps, David, but that's the very first step, is to what I call reframing your past narratives, where you have, as an active agent, not a victim, as an active agent, you're able to look back into the baggage that you're holding, that you're carrying, that's very heavy. And you begin to unpack some of those stories, some of those belief systems, and you transform them. You don't need a new book. You don't need a new training. You don't need all this external validation because it's already in you. You just need the wisdom to start looking into that bag and take that beautiful next step towards healing and also just reclaiming your voice of who you truly are and who you're becoming.
So how does the emotional component end up in that, where you're trying to reframe and not really reinvent, correct? You're just reframing.
Reframing.
Okay. How does that emotional component play a part in that?
That's a beautiful question, because one of the tools I use as we begin to go through this journey of reframing, then what we do is reset, and then we reclaim, right? Those are my 3 R's I go into unpacking the bag. And reset is really about elevating your standards, helping you become or envision the identity, the person, your future self, who you want to become. And all the coaching I do is I remind people it's not an intellectual process. It's not an overthinking process. It's an emotional process. It's about feelings and understanding, becoming deeply aware of what you're being triggered by, and what that feels like. So reset is really all about elevating how you show up and what standards are now defining your new trajectory. But the big part here is this. When you elevate your floor or your standards, that's a major reset in your life. And for many people, it's very hard and it's emotional because one of the tools I use is the 80-20 principle. And the 80-20 principle says that 80% of your activities contribute to 20% of your outcomes or your results. And then I also flip that. When you're going through this reset process, I tell people, look at it this way. So this means that really you have 20% of high impact, high, beautiful actions, belief systems, relationships that matter most to you in your life and are moving you closer to becoming who you want to become. And then the rest of the stuff is really noise, distractions, toxic relationships, old stories like, oh my gosh, he left me, or I don't have the Netflix password anymore, and this kind of stuff, right? And that is an emotional process. People they have a very hard time emotionally letting go of the 80% of those narratives, ideas, and belief systems that are no longer serving them. At some point in my personal experience, if I use my divorce or my alcoholic father, my 80% was it's survival mode. I'm going to numb my pain by drinking, keep looking and hanging out and going 100 miles per hour. So when I started to shed that old narrative, it was painful for me because for the longest time, I was the fun guy. I was the one who got out there and drink. Shoot, this is why I got married, because it was like a big roller coaster of fun. I'm talking about my first marriage. And it's painful to let go of that old identity or those belief systems, toxic relationships, ideas that no longer serve you. It's so connected to identity. And that's an emotional process. So once you are able to say, you know what, I'm being super honest with myself, that belief system or those people I hung out with, they no longer serve me. And when you're able to establish your reset, your floor, and you move and you act above the floor, that's the 20% that you're really going all in. 80% is no longer serving you. And when you do, that's when you have true transformation, where you're looking at breakthroughs and you're like, wow, I didn't know. Like, for example, my breakthrough was I quit drinking alcohol. Is no longer part of my standards. So it was an emotional process, but that's what it takes. We're emotional creatures.
So the drinking was 80%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly right. We flipped that ratio, and the drinking, getting onto my first relationship, my first marriage, I never should have. I'll be honest with you, not to talk smack about the person. She's who she is, but I had no business getting married. Not in my late 20s, and not with her. But I said,
one of my big things for healing is boundaries. You incorporate boundaries into that unpacking phase.
yeah, that's beautiful. That's definitely another way. Maybe if you use your imagination, if we go down the road of the 80-20 principle, right? You put 20% on top, then you draw a line. That's your boundary line. And then you have 80% at the bottom. Now, the beautiful part is the 20% and the part that you're exploring up here, it's all up for grabs. It's all up for you to start imagining and reframing the old stories that are holding you back and keeping you stuck and are screwing up your confidence. Those are the ones that you start to reframe. So you're able to say, okay, wait a second, this happened for me. Now, how can I give this experience, my divorce, for example, or whatever traumatic event, how can I give this experience new meaning, right? So then if we use the same alcoholic one, the new meaning would be alcohol in my life, in my system, no longer serves me, because if I keep drinking, it's going to affect my health. I might end up at the hospital again. It's going to affect my relationships, right? So that's the new meaning I gave it. And that lives in my 20%. So now my boundaries are, I'll go to social gatherings and I'm not going to judge people. I'm not going to preach, hey, don't drink, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to be that guy. I'm just simply not going to drink myself and just be cool. But that's the boundary I set. Now, if somebody asks me, hey, here's a drink, I'm going to say, no, thank you. That is your line. That is the 80%. That's what you say no to. And boundaries is a beautiful way to establish that, because another way to think about boundaries is establishing your reset, your line, your floor, your new standards.
How does the emotional recovery process differ for men versus women? There's a definite difference.
Yeah, for sure there's difference.
We were raised to be hunter-gatherers, don't cry, that work into your work.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. That's great questions. In the Hispanic Latino culture, we have what we call machismo, right? Men don't cry. We're strong. We're the breadwinners. And shoot, that kind of sucks, right? You have all the weight of that cultural, right, expectations on your shoulder. And I think that's beautiful, because at the end of the day, because I do coach men and women, at the end of the day, I help people understand and reframe where those expectations are coming from. Sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it comes from mom and dad, and sometimes it comes from your situation or environments, your partners, or the people, the company that you keep. But once you're able to name where your old stories have originate from, the better it's going to be for you to start understanding, now, what am I going to do about it? Because part of what we're talking about, or part of what I'm trying to share, is helping people understand that the inner work that's required is really one of awareness, deeply aware of who you are and having a more healthier relationship with yourself, and not beating yourself over because of your divorce or your past,
Correct.
but rather reframing that it did happen for you. And now you get to choose a new path. And again, one of the tools is really just looking at the 80-20 principle. There's one more tool that I really like to use, is this. It's a story from the Buddhist, who it's about the 2 arrows. And what happens is this: the first arrow that is thrown at you it hits you, and that arrow hurts. That makes you bleed. But the second arrow is the one in your mind that happens afterwards. So the first arrow represents pain, like true pain. The situation happened to you or for you. The second arrow is suffering. Now you get to choose. Do you want to continue suffering? So I tell the parable of the 2 arrows is also a tool that I use when we talk about emotion health, because it's a choice, man. And having the freedom and the awareness to be like, wait a second, it's freaking scary, but I actually am the author of my own stories. I get to choose whether or not I continue to suffer, or I can acknowledge that the first arrow hurt heck, whether it's your divorce or alcoholism, whatever it is. And now I get to choose not suffering.
Let's talk about my favorite cousins: self-respect, self-compassion, self-love. Those are the cousins that men have a hard time with. How can you relate to those cousins? Talk to the men about those cousins.
Oh man, I didn't know you were going to go there. You're going to make me cry. A lot of this has to do with pride, right? As men growing up, you went there, right? You talked about, for Hispanic Latino, this is the machismo, right? It's the male dominated. It's these expectations that we ascribe or prescribe or embody. And growing up, I grew up in the 80s. I fell on my bike or I got hurt, and then mom, dad were like, man, suck it up. You're fine. And back in the day, believe it or not, the remedy was cut a piece of lime or lemon and rub it on your wound and you're good.
It really had no purpose, man.
But so you grow up with this baggage. That's my big framework is about bagging and looking at really deeply into that bag that you carry with yourself. And bag stands for the belief systems, B, and A is the assumptions that hold those belief systems. And then G is the guardians, which is the protective actions and behaviors. And for me, it was avoidance and it was survival mode. For others, it could be perfectionism or whatever. But either way, those belief systems hold you safe. They kept you safe at some point in your life. But when you want to grow and change, when you start, looking at self-confidence or self-awareness, all the different self-care, you begin to have a tension in your mind and in your heart and in your feelings, because nobody teaches this to men. Nobody teaches you to be self-compassion, to give yourself grace for all the crap you've gone through, to understand that self-love is just that, self-love. Because if you're not kind to yourself, nobody else is going to be to it. At the end of the day, the world doesn't care about your sob, about your past, about your story. Only you are the one responsible for your own actions and beliefs. So I tell people it behooves you to have a better, more healthy relationship with yourself. And once you're able to move in that direction, then all of the selves, as you conceptualize them, self-love, self-compassion, self-care, starts to feel safe and feel okay. Because remember, your past, the bag, the stories you tell yourself, it's survival mode. And really, you just want to be safe. But if nobody's showed you how to be safe, then you have no opportunity to just sit.
Oh, that makes sense.
Just sit down and be like, shit, I didn't know that self-care was something good, that's something for men. And you start really, what happens, David, is you don't look at it as male or female anymore. You just look at it as human. Our reptilian brain is so conditioned to be focused on survival mode. So all of our coming up and experiences are very easily interpreted as survival. But then when divorce hits you in the freaking face like a freight train, self-esteem, yeah, of course. So I think this comes down to lack of confidence, right? And
Okay.
I like to teach people about that if you're going to chase confidence or happiness or self-esteem, you're going to go about it the wrong way. So part of the reframing process that I help people go through is being able to reframe your experiences, be able to reframe how do you measure what you did in the last 10 years, for example, right? Last 6 months or whatever the time frame is. We humans are not really used to looking at our achievements or having a record of all the awesome goals that we achieved, right? So what happens is that we're always moving in the other way, right? We look at an ideal and we're measuring ourselves forward and trying to say, here's a goal, or here's my marriage. Ideally, this is what I wanted to do. And then when you don't hit that ideal, and obviously ideals, you're never going to reach an ideal, right? You beat yourself up. And then that's a hit to your self-esteem. That's a hit to your confidence, right? The same thing when you're on social media scrolling for hours, you're comparing yourself to other men or other people, and that's a hit to your self-esteem because you're not measuring up. So in the reframing process, we look at reality-based situations or the proof that you've actually achieved and grown, that you're actually on your own race, right? So being able to reframe the divorce, for example, as having it for you, then it becomes a win. It becomes a lesson. It becomes a gain. And then if you are able to reframe last week that it was not a total failure or a loss, that you actually did some great things there, you learned and grew as an individual a lot, then that becomes a gain. So after to go through this process and learn what we call wins or gains, that you're always going to be looking for your daily wins, and you're going to start journaling and reflecting and understanding. So pretty soon you're going to rack up all these wins and all these gains, and you're going to be winning. And that does so much for your self-esteem, because happiness is in the now. It's not in the future, that if I attain this, if I process, if I've married a new person or blah, 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 whatever, fill in the blank, those what ifs are conditional. So if you miss it, you beat yourself up and you're not happy. Versus I'm going to turn around and I'm going to look at what I actually accomplished. And if I fell on my butt, what did I learn? Because you're not a failure. You're either going to win or learn, or it's always a gain. And that takes emotional process of reframing those situations for it to happen for you. So you can look at you're on this winning streak. Because it's a measurement. If you're measuring the wrong things, then you're just going down that rabbit hole of feeding your low self-esteem, low confidence, and you're not able to get out of that dark pit.
Yeah. As we close up, two things. I want you to talk about true change, facilitating true change. We talked about that in the pre-interview. And then you can talk about there's a free thing that you want to give to the men out there. But let's talk about facilitating true change. What's the elements of that?
Okay, great. So one of the things that for myself, I went through this health crisis and I went through this reawakening or an awakening, if you will. And I went through my own coaching. I paid for a coach and a couple of coaches now. And I went all in on positive psychology because coming up in human resources and in training, that kind of environment, I always had a hard time with CEOs or leadership saying, "Hey, Raul, can you just write a policy for me and this will fix the problem?" Or, "Hey, Raul, can you just give me the shortcut, the checklist, the cliff notes, and this will fix the problem?" I always had a hard time with that. And then fast forward to my health crisis and my own healing process, I discovered that the missing piece to all of the things that we want to change in our lives, right? The true transformation, it's not about what we call a technical solution to an adaptive problem. It's an adaptive solution to an adaptive problem. So the true nature of transformation is really that adaptive problem and adaptive solution. So this is why I went all in on positive psychology and figuring out what I need to do to heal my own self. And then I began teaching others about it and I began to develop my framework. And the framework, the bag we carry, is looking at the beliefs and the assumptions and the guardians in there and transforming those and reframing them into something that suits you better. Because at the end, what you really want is the true transformation and transform that bag, that heavy, dark bag, into a jetpack that you put on and it propels you forward into the future of who you want to become. That sounds a little poetic, but deep down, I think I shared my 3 R's, which is reset, reframe, reset, and then reclaim. Reframe your past, reframe your stories, reset your standards, and then go all in on reclaiming who you are, who you're becoming. Once you do that, that requires a lot of emotional inner work. When you do that, you're able to really view my analogy from a heavy bag to a jetpack, and you're always winning, you're always rising, and you're moving closer and closer to who you're becoming, to your true goals, to your true nature, your true voice as a beautiful human here on earth, contributing and establishing yourself. And whether there's a new marriage in the works or whatever it might be, entrepreneurship or leadership goal, it's totally possible, but it has to take place inside first before you see the outward results.
Oh, all right, sir. What about the free offering that you were talking about earlier?
Awesome. One of the things that my model is, my coaching model, I do this part-time and I love it. I work one-on-one with people. And one of the ways that I do this, I have a free gift for the listeners. And that is it's a tiny challenge. Who doesn't like a challenge, right? It's a leadership challenge. And it's a 5-day experience. It's an exclusive one-on-one 30 minutes or so per day, back to back coaching, where we start unpacking some of those core beliefs. And then at the end of day 5, you have a better understanding of where you want to go, more of a roadmap of what's next in your life. And of course, if you want to continue, I'll share how you can continue working with me. But at this point, or at least the point of this challenge, is to see how much you can transform within these 5 days. And it's a tiny challenge. And can I give it my URL so they can sign up if anybody wants to? Yeah. So it's rtplearning.com/tiny, the word tiny, TINY. So RTP, Raul Torres Pereyra, right? And then learning. So rtplearning.com/tiny. And then there's simple application process. And again, it's a challenge. And you're going to work, but it's all inner work.
All right, Raul, that was awesome, man. I learned.
That's great.
I love doing these podcasts. Everybody has everybody makes me think. So I really appreciate it. But we will have all his links in the show notes and go from there. But we appreciate Raul taking time to hang out with us and hold on the line. Don't go anywhere.
Awesome. Happy to be here. Thank you.